Welcome. The goals for this session are based on the following standards listed on the slide. These include the Kansas State Department of Education standards for pre-K 6 for elementary and English grades 6 through 12, KSD Reading Specialist standards, and the International Dyslexia Association Knowledge and Practice standards for teachers of reading. In addition, the IDA Knowledge and Practice standards for teachers of reading are also integrated with all KSDE standards. The KSDE and IDA standards establish the proficiency levels for conceptual knowledge and practical skills expected of every candidate enrolled in an accredited undergraduate or graduate educator preparation program. Each one is hyperlinked and will take you to the complete list of standards. For your convenience, we have pulled out the specific standards for sound symbol associations in one document since this session focuses on phonics. Aligned with the KSDE and IDA standards, this session's 4 objectives provide learning experiences to gain conceptual knowledge and practical skills for teaching phonics. As you can see, they progress from the knowledge and application level of English orthography and sound symbol associations to creating, implementing, and evaluating evidence-based practices for teaching phonics. In this video, we will focus on the first 2 objectives. Let's review a model that explains the components necessary for skilled reading. Coffin-Tunmer's original simple view reading model demonstrates that a reader must be skilled at word recognition and language comprehension to achieve reading comprehension. In its inception, the authors initially used the term decoding, the sounding out and blending of the smaller units within a word to read the word. However, they replaced it with the term word recognition, which elevates the skill to a higher level of automaticity with print. For example, if I encountered the word cat in print, I would be decoding if I said k, a, t, cat, t, cat. But if I came to the word and read it as a whole unit, cat, then I'm instantly recognizing it and reading it accurately. The word cat in this case is a sight word for me. Word recognition is the accurate and instant recognition of a word in print, and it is read as a whole unit. In other words, word recognition is reading words by sight. We will discuss word recognition and language comprehension in more detail on the next slide as we break down the underlying concepts, skills, and tasks associated with each one. The main takeaway from this model is that both domains, word recognition and language comprehension, are necessary to comprehend when reading text. In this session devoted to phonics, we will specifically focus on the word recognition component. The next slide further elaborates on each domain and the focus on word recognition. In Scarborough's reading rope, we can clearly see why we're focusing on phonics in this session. The skills and tasks woven together into the bottom strands of the rope represent the foundational skills that support word recognition. The goal for these skills is to become increasingly automatic. We already mentioned 2 of those that are relative to our session, decoding and sight recognition. The shift to becoming increasingly more automatic involves the interaction of the network of foundational skills seen in the word recognition strands. Phonological awareness, specifically phonemic awareness. More on this topic can be found in the phonemic awareness session. Decoding and sight word recognition. Building a larger bank of sight word vocabulary occurs through the development of orthographic mapping. Airy refers to orthographic mapping as the permanent representation of the spelling of words in memory, so they're instantly retrieved for pronunciation when reading. She further elaborates, quote, knowledge of the alphabetic system provides the glue that bonds orthographic to phonological identities and establishes spellings of words in memory. As students become aware of the sounds in spoken words and the connections between sounds and the way these are represented in print, in other words, sound symbol relationships, they can more easily break down the code we use for print. Through decoding, however, students may be accurate but read at a slow rate. Reading may appear choppy and disfluent. Becoming increasingly automatic and building upon the sight word vocabulary so that they are able to read by sight and recognize words instantly and effortlessly requires the development of orthographic mapping. What type of instruction leads to the development of orthographic mapping and to supporting students to become increasingly more automatic with word recognition? Let's find out. Grounded in the science of reading, structured literacy is an evidence-based approach for teaching reading. In this infographic, it is characterized by certain principles and elements. Let's take a look at these in more detail. Teachers should utilize structured literacy in whole group, small group, and within the response to intervention framework for whole class reading instruction at Tier 1 and small groups of students at Tiers 2 and 3. Decisions about instruction at Tiers 2 and 3 should be based on data from universal screeners, diagnostic assessments, and progress monitoring. Instruction should focus on the following elements: phoneme grapheme correspondences, also known as sound symbol associations or phonics, syllable types, morphemes, vocabulary, sentence structure, text structure, and the integration of reading comprehension and spelling and written expression. In this particular session, we will focus on phoneme grapheme relationships. First, structured literacy instruction for all of these elements must be explicit. This means applying the gradual release of responsibility. I do, we do, to do, you do. A sequence where the responsibility for performing a task moves from teacher to student. Think of it this way: the teacher goes through an explicit show and tell before the student practices. Second, structured literacy instruction must be systematic. This entails specific routines and consistent academic vocabulary through a designated scope and sequence. Third, structured literacy instruction is cumulative. This means teaching easier skills first and building on those skills to teach more complex ones. It is important to note that skills should be taught to mastery before moving on. Finally, structured literacy instruction is data-driven or diagnostic, meaning instruction is based on assessment from universal screeners, diagnostic assessments, and progress monitoring assessments. The latter should be applied at scheduled intervals to monitor the effectiveness of instruction and individual student progress. Typically, students in Tier 2 are progress monitored as determined by the building based on how quickly instructional adjustments can be made, for example, every other week, and students in Tier 3 are progress monitored weekly. Students must receive immediate corrective feedback during instruction, and instruction should be interactive and include a multisensory piece, such as concrete representations of abstract concepts and manipulatives. Before implementing instruction, purposeful planning and consideration of instructional tasks and text are essential. In the next video, we will provide you with a sample lesson plan template that will guide you through designing a structured literacy phonics lesson plan for sound symbol relationships. Right now, let's take a look at the concept of the sound symbol relationships, or the phoneme grapheme element of structured literacy. The alphabetic principle is the awareness that sounds are represented by print. The representation of sound in print is expressed by single letters and graphemes. Graphemes are combinations of patterns of letters that represent a particular sound. For example, the ch sound is represented by the digraph spell with two letters, C and H, as in the word cherry. The sound f can be represented by the single letter F, or digraph PH as in phonics, or GH as in rough. Tolman's hourglass illustrates the alphabetic principle in the middle of the graphic, pointing to the one-to-one correspondence of matching sound to print. The bottom half of the hourglass lists the print patterns associated with English orthography. These print patterns progress from simple to complex, in other words, from single letters representing sounds to graphemes representing vowels or consonant sounds with two or more letters. You can view Dr. Tolman's video for an additional explanation of the bottom part of the hourglass in relation to Seidenberg and McClellan's four-part processing model. Why are we drawing attention to the alphabetic principle and the domain of orthography? First, we need to be aware that English has a deep, opaque orthography. There are 40 to 45 phonemes, more speech sounds than there are letters, of which there are 26. Second, in order to break the code of print and develop word recognition abilities for fluent reading, explicit teaching of letter names, complex graphemes, such as digraphs, trigraphs, vowel teams, and letter sounds is a must. Each sound must be mapped to a specific letter or more complex graphemes to be committed to memory. Third, knowing the science behind the pedagogy answers why we implement structured literacy to teach reading. The next 3 slides summarize types of sounds and their connections to orthographic patterns. It is important to draw attention to the manner of production and place of articulation for vowel and consonant sounds. Teachers must be aware of how a sound is produced and articulated so that they explicitly model and scaffold to help students establish the connections between sounds and print. We begin with an overview of sounds representing consonants. The consonants chart document linked on the slide describes the place of articulation for each sound in more detail. As you can see on this summary slide here, manner of production refers to the type of sound as determined by the airflow when producing the sound and by engagement or disengagement of the vocal cords for voiced or unvoiced consonant sounds. The place of articulation refers to the physical placement and positional shifting of the lips and tongue in relation to the teeth. For example, the manner of production for the stop sounds p and b is characterized by a puff of air forced forward. You can place your hand in front of your mouth as you say each sound. Notice that these 2 sounds are produced with the same place of articulation. Lips together at the beginning and open after the sounds are released. The only difference is in the manner of production. P is unvoiced or voiceless. B is voiced. To check if a sound is voiced or unvoiced, gently place your hand on the front of your throat about midway. Say each sound and feel for the vibration in the voiced B and the lack of vibration in the unvoiced P. The bottom graphic icon showing an arrow moving from the front of the mouth to the back represents the place of articulation for the different types of consonant sounds based on the manner they're produced. Sounds at the top of the chart are typically produced toward the front of the mouth. As we move down the chart, the place of articulation for the sounds moves to the back of the mouth toward the throat. The consonants chart document linked on the slides describes the place of articulation for each sound in more detail. Take a few minutes to produce each sound as you look in a mirror to note the differences in the manner of production and place of articulation. When you practice producing the nasal sounds, gently pinch your nose. Where does the airflow occur? You may notice that it is different from the other consonant sounds. Modeling the manner of production for students and utilizing a mirror to show students the placement of the lips, tongue, and teeth helps to make students aware of the correct sound pronunciation in connection to specific print patterns, such as letters and graphemes. This instructional practice is helpful and can be applied not just to consonants, but also for vowels. Which will we review next? This technical chart outlines the place of articulation for each vowel. As you can see, it focuses on the articulation of the sound based on where it is produced, toward the front, middle, or back of the mouth. Since our session focuses on phonics, let's look at both place of articulation and the print patterns associated with these vowel sounds. In this chart, adapted from Modes, you will see the vowel sounds with their corresponding spellings. Each vowel sound on the upside down slope is represented with a breathe, a small curve above the spelling to denote a short vowel sound, or a macron, a small straight line above the spelling to denote a long vowel sound. Below each vowel sound, there are simple, common spellings for each vowel, more complex ones, and less common spellings. The spellings are in the context of a word. Vowel spellings are more tricky than consonant spellings. Just look at how many different print patterns there are to spell the long A and the long O vowel sounds. The upside down slope represents how the chin drops as each sound is made. Starting at the top left side and moving down, you will see a change in the place of articulation, especially visible in the mouth shape, the lips, and the teeth. At the bottom left, you will see the print patterns or graphemes called diphthongs, oi and ow. As a visual, there is a school bus to symbolize the shift in the place of articulation. The mouth shape changes as each sound is made. To the bottom right, you will see the R-controlled vowels. Some of you may know them as bossy R. The first group of graphemes, IR, ER, and UR, all map out to the sound The meaning of the word here will restrict which grapheme is used to spell the word. Recall that the meaning and context processors are also involved besides phonological and orthographic processors in Seidenberg and McClellan's model. Two other R-controlled vowels that map to specific sounds are also listed. AR, that resembles what a pirate would say, R, and OR, that sounds like or. By accessing the following links, you can review the phonics and spelling rules for phonograms listed in order of frequency, advanced phonograms, and a list of common prefixes, suffixes, and rules for adding suffixes. Teaching the rules is important when providing explicit instruction. However, if a student can repeat the rules, it does not mean that the student can apply the rules for reading and/or spelling. The focus of instruction should be on teaching recognition of high-frequency phonics patterns rather than memorizing rules that often have exceptions. Please be sure to proceed to the next video that will further elaborate on practical skills for teaching phonics, classroom applications, and creating, implementing, and evaluating evidence-based practices for teaching phonics.